accepting the things that we see with our eyes, believing the things that we perceive with our senses directly. These seem like core notions of how we understand reality. But how much of what we accept as the reality around us relates now, in this day and age, from our own senses directly, rather than from a representation like video, like explanation of a textual form like news, or audio communication like a phone call or voice recording. We rely and depend on the indirect signals given to us via these sense proxies in order to form a concept of what we think reality is like. For the most part, we do it intuitively, automatically, integrating the various pieces together into how we understand our daily lives. And this makes sense for most small items. There's no reason to question whether the pizza delivery guy who just called to say he's 5 minutes away is accurately representing reality, unless you know you always get your pizza late. But otherwise, you assume there's no reason to disregard this piece of information or to question it. We make many assumptions about how these fragments of truthfulness represent reality as a whole. But for more controversial, difficult, or complex topics, it's a whole different arena. Accepting a version of the daily news as the most accurate, believing that a certain philosophical viewpoint has a basis in reality more than a different viewpoint, or judging a well-known figure based on what is told about them. These things are much more difficult to ratify, and yet they make up a huge, important piece of our understanding of reality. We may not always live our daily lives by these things, but we use them to inform how we make life decisions, how we interact with others, and how we vote. This is taken to a whole new level and, in a sense, a new domain, with the emergence of technologies that are capable of emulating and faking reality in real time, with things like audio generation on the fly that sounds like a real human talking or even represents a real human being saying something they didn't say, or deepfakes that falsely impute words or actions to an individual that they may never have said or performed. This makes the challenge of integrating these kinds of information into our representation of reality much more dubious and much more complicated. It's not like no one has seen these things coming, and it's not like no one is taking preventative measures, both in terms of legislature against things like deepfakes, as well as tools to help detect and defend against this kind of misinformation. But these feel, to me at least, more like temporary solutions. It's almost implausible that all of these technologies will not keep progressing. And while we may never achieve perfection in how we represent reality in an artificial construct, it seems certain that we'll quickly become close enough to perfection that it will, at the very least, stay ahead in this particular arms race. The more these technologies progress, the less we can necessarily assume that what we see and hear can be believed. But in this extremely intricate and complicated technological domain, there may be one very simple axiom which we can apply, something as old as the ages, and that is, don't believe everything you read. It's an old saying, but it remains legitimate. Just because information is presented to you doesn't mean that information is accurate. As the philosopher Bertrand Russell said, when you lack information, simply abstain from judgment. It's okay to hold information in your head, start to form an opinion about some aspect of reality, and refrain from coming to a conclusion at the moment, because you lack certain evidence. Of course, we can't apply this to everything in our lives, or we'd be frozen with inaction. We need to be able to decide what we believe is real, decide what we believe is correct, and act on that. But in a world where media of any kind is so simple to fake or to generate, the least we can do is corroborate our information. You're not doing yourself any favors if when you're presented with some information, you assume it to be true just because you have seen it. The time and effort it takes to corroborate this new knowledge, at least to a minimal extent, is well worth the investment, because the picture that we build up of reality will have that much more of a chance of being accurate. And when each person is doing this, then the picture of reality that we have as society as a whole becomes more accurate. And the dialogues we have, the arguments we have, the solutions we try to wrangle between different viewpoints will be that much more effective.